The wedding hall glittered like a promise that had never known hunger. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across polished marble floors, catching on gold-rimmed chairs and silk gowns that whispered wealth with every movement. This was not just a wedding. It was a declaration of power. And at the center of it all stood Evelyn Carter, the bride, radiant in white, chin lifted, smile rehearsed for history. Beside her stood Jonathan Hale, her billionaire groom, composed, reserved, impossibly calm. The kind of man who owned companies people only whispered about. The kind of man whose past was never mentioned in interviews. The guests rose as the music softened. And that was when she appeared. A poor girl, no older than 20, stood frozen near the aisle's edge, her simple blue dress painfully out of place among sequins and tailored suits. Her hands clutched a thin envelope so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She hadn't meant to be seen yet. She was waiting for the right moment, one she didn't understand but had been instructed to follow. Evelyn noticed immediately. Her smile tightened, just a fraction. She leaned toward her maid of honor, whispering with barely concealed irritation. "Who let that in?" The maid of honor glanced back, uncomfortable. She said she was sent by the Orphanage Foundation, something about a delivery from Mr. Hale. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the girl again, downward, dismissive. Orphanage. The word landed like an insult in her mind. Before anyone could stop her, Evelyn stepped forward. The music halted. The room stilled. "Excuse me," Evelyn said sweetly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. "This is a private event." The poor girl flinched as dozens of eyes turned toward her. She swallowed hard. I was told to give this to Mr. Hale. Just this." She raised the envelope slightly, her hand shaking now. A murmur rippled through the guests. Pity, discomfort, curiosity. Evelyn laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. "Jonathan doesn't receive charity pleas at his wedding," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Security will escort you out." The word charity sliced deep. The girl's shoulders collapsed inward. Her eyes dropped to the floor as tears welled, uninvited and humiliating. But before security could move. "Wait." Jonathan's voice cut through the room. Not loud, but absolute. Evelyn turned, startled. "Jonathan." He was staring at the girl. Not at the envelope. Not at her clothes. At her face. Something about her expression tugged at him. An ache he hadn't felt in years. A memory he had locked away because it hurt too much to revisit. The girl looked up then, meeting his eyes for the first time. And for one brief, breathless second, Jonathan forgot where he was. Forgot the crowd. Forgot the bride beside him. Because the way the girl rubbed her thumb against the envelope, over and over, nervously, was something he had seen before. Long ago, in a hospital hallway that no longer existed. Her name was Lily. At least, that was the name written on every foster file she had ever known. Standing at the edge of the wedding hall, Lily felt the weight of 1,000 stares press into her skin. Her ears rang as whispers curled through the air like smoke, soft, judgmental, cutting. She wanted to disappear. She always had. She had learned early how to become small. In group homes, being quiet meant being safe. In foster houses, being grateful meant being tolerated. And at the orphanage, being invisible meant surviving. Lily lowered her eyes, focusing on the marble floor beneath her worn shoes. She counted the tiny cracks between tiles, the same way she had once counted ceiling stains in a dormitory room to keep from crying herself to sleep. She hadn't wanted to come here. That morning, the orphanage director had hesitated before calling her into the office, a detail Lily noticed because adults usually didn't hesitate around her. They usually decided things for her. "There's a letter," the director said, sliding the envelope across the desk. "From Mr. Jonathan Hale. He funds half her programs." Lily remembered frowning. "Why me?" The woman studied her carefully then, her gaze lingering longer than necessary. "Because he requested you." That had been strange. No donor ever requested her. On the ride to the wedding venue, Lily had felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. Not fear exactly. Something heavier. Like walking toward a door she didn't remember opening. But knowing what was behind it could change everything. Now inside the hall, that feeling had doubled. She felt it again when Jonathan Hale told security to wait. When he looked at her like he was seeing something impossible. Lily's fingers brushed the small silver locket at her neck, a habit she'd had since childhood. She didn't remember her parents. She didn't remember being held. But she remembered waking up once, very young, clutching that locket as if it were the last solid thing in the world. Every foster parent had asked about it. She never had an answer. Evelyn's presence loomed beside Jonathan, bright, flawless, sharp. Lily sensed hostility radiating from her without looking up. Women like Evelyn always knew how to spot girls like Lily, and they never liked what they saw. Jonathan stepped closer. "Where did you get the letter?" he asked gently. Lily swallowed. "The orphanage. They said you asked for it to be delivered today." His brow furrowed. "Did they say why?" She shook her head. Behind them, Evelyn shifted impatiently. "Jonathan, this is embarrassing." Lily flinched at the word. Embarrassing. She had been called worse, but never in a room this beautiful. Jonathan's gaze drifted again, this time to the locket. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Something in his posture changed, like a man bracing against a sudden wind. "That necklace," he said quietly. "Have you always had it?" Lily nodded. "Since I was a baby, that's what they told me." The room felt too quiet. Jonathan's breath hitched, barely noticeable but real. A memory flickered through his mind without warning. A woman with tired eyes. A hospital bracelet. A tiny hand gripping silver as alarms rang in the distance. He stepped back, shaken. Evelyn laughed lightly. "Jonathan, you're letting her play you." Lily looked down again, ashamed but confused now too. Because for the first time in her life, someone important had looked at her like she mattered. Jonathan Hale had built his life on control. Control over markets. Control over risk. Control over emotions. It was how he survived the years after Claire. Yet as Lily stood before him, small, shaking, painfully out of place, control slipped through his fingers like sand. He hadn't planned to open the envelope immediately. Weddings were supposed to be ceremonial, symbolic. But something in his chest urged him to step away, to breathe, to understand why the sight of this girl felt like a fracture reopening. During the reception, while Evelyn circulated among guests with practiced elegance, Jonathan retreated to a quiet side room. The envelope lay unopened in his hands, heavier than paper had any right to be. He broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in careful, respectful handwriting. "Mr. Hale, thank you for everything you have done for our children." Enclosed is something that was recently rediscovered during a records review. The girl who delivered this letter was present the day it was found. Jonathan's fingers trembled as he pulled out the second item. A photocopy. A hospital birth record. The date hit him first like a punch to the ribs. Then the location. Then the name of the mother. Claire Hale. The room tilted. Jonathan sank into a chair as the memory he had spent decades locking away broke free. Flashback, 20 years earlier. The hospital had smelled of smoke and antiseptic. Claire lay exhausted, smiling weakly as she pressed a newborn into Jonathan's arms. A girl, tiny, perfect, wrapped in a white blanket with a silver locket resting against her chest. "My mother's," Claire whispered. "For protection." Then the alarms began. Fire. Evacuation. Chaos. Jonathan remembered being forced down a stairwell as nurses rushed patients in every direction. Remembered shouting Claire's name. Remembered being told later that records were lost, rooms destroyed, bodies unaccounted for. They found Claire's body 2 days later. They never found the baby. Jonathan had searched for years. Private investigators. Lawyers. Hospitals across state lines. Nothing. Eventually, grief had convinced him of the unthinkable, that his daughter hadn't survived. He folded the paper now, his hands unsteady. Back in the ballroom, Evelyn laughed brightly at a joke someone made, her ring flashing beneath the chandeliers. She looked happy, victorious. Jonathan stood and returned to the crowd, but his eyes searched only for Lily. He found her near the exit, alone, shoulders drawn inward like she was bracing for another blow. When she shifted, her hair moved, and Jonathan saw it. just beneath her ear, a faint crescent-shaped birthmark. The same mark Claire had kissed, crying, moments after their daughter was born. Jonathan's breath stopped. He took a step forward. Then another. "Lily," he said softly. She turned, startled. For the first time, she saw tears in the eyes of a man who had everything. Evelyn noticed the shift in energy instantly. "What's going on?" she asked sharply, stepping between them. Jonathan didn't answer her. He was staring at Lily like the world had finally given something back. And Lily, confused and frightened, felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Not fear, recognition. Evelyn Carter had never been afraid of losing control. She had grown up in rooms where power was subtle, where smiles hid leverage, and humiliation was simply another language of dominance. Today was supposed to be her coronation, her wedding, her proof that she had married up into legacy, wealth, permanence. So when she noticed Jonathan's attention drifting, again, toward the poor girl, irritation hardened into something sharper. Danger. She watched Lily from across the ballroom as the girl hovered near the exit, unsure whether to leave or stay. Evelyn saw weakness and mistook it for entitlement. Girls like that always wanted something. Money, sympathy, access. Evelyn crossed the room, heels clicking decisively. Enjoying the reception, she asked Lily with a smile that never reached her eyes. Lily startled. I was just about to go." "Good," Evelyn replied lightly. "You've caused enough disruption already." Jonathan stiffened. "Evelyn." She raised a hand without looking at him. "Understand, Charity," Evelyn continued, voice calm but cutting. "But there's a time and place. Showing up like this only reinforces why boundaries exist." Lily's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." "Of course you did," Evelyn said, leaning closer. "That envelope, that sad look. You knew people would watch." A few nearby guests fell silent, sensing something wrong but unwilling to intervene. Jonathan stepped forward. "That's enough." Evelyn turned on him, incredulous. "Why are you defending her?" "Because she might be my daughter," his mind screamed. But the words lodged in his chest. He needed certainty, proof, time. Lily's fingers drifted to her locket unconsciously. Evelyn noticed and scoffed. "Still clinging to that cheap thing? You really should learn when to let go." The comment landed wrong. Jonathan's control snapped. "That locket," he said slowly, "is not cheap." Evelyn laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Jonathan, don't be ridiculous." She turned to the guests, raising her voice just enough. "Let's all remember today is about celebrating us, not indulging delusions." Humiliation washed over Lily again, hotter than before. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry this time. Something inside her, old, buried, rose up quietly. "I didn't come for money," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I came because I was asked." Evelyn smiled thinly. "And now you're leaving." She gestured to security. That was when Jonathan saw it clearly. The same curve of Lily's jaw, the same stubborn steadiness beneath fear. Claire's daughter. He stepped between Evelyn and Lily. "Stop," he said. The room froze. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. "Jonathan, you're embarrassing me." He turned to her fully, his voice low but unmistakably dangerous. "No," he said. "You embarrassed yourself the moment you decided to humiliate her." Gasps rippled through the guests. Lily's heart pounded. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew, instinctively, that something was about to break open. Jonathan looked at her again, eyes shining. "Stay," he said gently. Evelyn's face drained of color. "Jonathan," she whispered, "what aren't you telling me?" He didn't answer, because the truth, when it came, would destroy her. Silence swallowed the ballroom. Not the polite kind, the kind that presses against your chest and makes breathing feel like a mistake. Jonathan stood motionless between Evelyn and Lily, his posture no longer that of a groom hosting guests, but of a man standing guard over something sacred. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, betraying the storm he had held back for hours. Evelyn searched his face, waiting for him to laugh, to brush this off, to restore order. He didn't. Instead, Jonathan turned to Lily. "What's your full name?" he asked quietly. Lily hesitated. "Lily, that's all I've ever been given." A flicker of pain crossed his face. Do you remember anything before the orphanage? He pressed gently. She shook her head. Just noises. Alarms. Someone holding me too tight. Jonathan closed his eyes. The memory aligned too perfectly. He reached into his jacket and unfolded the photocopy with careful hands. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the room without effort. 20 years ago, my wife gave birth to a daughter during a hospital evacuation caused by a fire, he said. The baby disappeared. Declared lost. Presumed dead. Evelyn laughed nervously. Jonathan, stop. This isn't funny. He ignored her. Today, he continued, a record resurfaced, delivered by this young woman. Jonathan lifted his gaze to Lily. My daughter. The word fell like a verdict. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Disbelief. Evelyn staggered back as if struck. No, that's impossible. You would have known. I searched for years, Jonathan said, his voice breaking now. I stopped because grief convinced me to. He stepped toward Lily, eyes wet. I never stopped loving you. Lily's knees weakened. No, she whispered. You're mistaken. People like you don't come from people like me. Jonathan reached for the locket. Claire gave you that, he said. Her mother's. For protection. Lily's breath hitched. She had never told anyone where it came from. Evelyn's world collapsed in real time. She looked around the room, at the guests, the cameras, the whispers, and realized something horrifying. She hadn't humiliated a poor girl. She had humiliated her billionaire husband's lost daughter. At her own wedding. Publicly. Her voice came out thin. Jonathan, please. He turned to her slowly. You looked at her and saw nothing, he said. That tells me everything I need to know. Lily stood frozen, tears spilling freely now, not from shame but shock. A lifetime of unanswered questions crashed into her all at once. I didn't come for this, she sobbed. I didn't want to ruin anything. Jonathan pulled her into his arms without hesitation. You didn't ruin anything, he said. You came home. Evelyn sank into a chair, her dress pooling around her like a fallen curtain. The wedding was over, but the reckoning had only just begun. Guests who had arrived for celebration left in stunned silence, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Cameras were lowered, smiles erased. What was meant to be the most triumphant day of Evelyn Carter's life dissolved into something she would never escape. Evelyn remained seated long after the room cleared. Her veil lay discarded beside her, pearls scattered across the marble floor like evidence of a life unraveling. She stared at nothing, replaying every word she had spoken, every look she had cast at Lily. Poor girl. Charity case. Embarrassment. Each memory now burned. Across the hall, Jonathan sat with Lily in a quiet corner. Not speaking, not rushing, just sitting, present in a way Lily had never known an adult to be. For the first time, no one was asking her to move, to leave, to make herself smaller. You don't have to decide anything today, Jonathan said softly. Or tomorrow, or this year. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. I don't even know how to feel. That's okay, he replied. I waited 20 years. I can wait longer. That patience, so unlike the world she knew, broke her more than cruelty ever had. In the days that followed, the story spread. Not as gossip, as reckoning. Headlines didn't focus on the billionaire revelation. They focused on the bride who humiliated a poor girl at her wedding, unaware she was her billionaire husband's lost daughter. Footage of Evelyn's words circulated, stripped of context but heavy with consequence. Evelyn issued apologies. Private, public, legal. None of them mattered. Jonathan annulled the marriage quietly, without spectacle. Wealth gave him options, but integrity guided his choice. He refused interviews, refused commentary. His only focus was Lily. Tests confirmed what his heart already knew. She was his daughter. Yet Jonathan never announced it like a trophy. He never forced affection. He invited her into his life with the same gentleness he wished he had been allowed years ago. Lily didn't move into a mansion. She stayed where she was by choice. She wanted time, space, truth without pressure. Jonathan respected that. Sometimes they met for coffee. Sometimes for long walks. Sometimes they sat in silence, letting familiarity grow naturally. One evening, Lily opened the locket for the first time. Inside was a tiny photo of Claire, smiling softly. Lily cried. Not for what she had lost, but for what she had found. Evelyn watched from afar as her name faded from relevance. Wealth cushioned her fall, but reputation did not. She had humiliated someone she thought was beneath her, and in doing so, revealed exactly who she was. As for Lily, she was no longer invisible, not because she was rich, but because she was finally seen. And Jonathan Hale, once the most powerful man in the room, learned that the greatest fortune he ever lost was also the one that came back to him.